I never knew that I don't know if this is across the board, but apparently if you're sick during your annual leave, you can claim that time back.
I remember you sent me that message. I was like, what?
I was like, what? Do you know the amount of times I've been sick on annual leave? But I've just been like, oh, well, it's life. Carry on. And I found out about it again because I was talking to a colleague friend, and she was like, yeah, I was really sick on my annual leave for 2 days, so I'm claiming it back, or however it is that you do it. And I was like, huh? What? This is a thing? Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Listen In podcast. My name's Aravana.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it.
On today's episode, we'll be talking about our rights in the workplace, what we've always known, as well as what we've learned along the way. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
So today I thought it would be really good for us to talk a bit about knowing your rights at work. And I wanted to start by asking you guys a question. Do you know your rights at work?
The very short answer to that is not entirely. And I say that because in terms of my everyday sort of doing the day-to-day job rights, I feel like I do know that. Obviously things in terms of like annual leave, at least some things about annual leave, in terms of like the sickness policy and all of that kind of stuff. I do have basic knowledge about that kind of stuff, but I feel like there's other things, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot more in the conversation, but there are other things that I don't feel like I know a lot about, I don't know a lot about. But also, and I know that we might pick this up later, but I also feel like it's one thing to know your rights, but for me, it's also about having the confidence really to ask.
Mm-hmm. And Aravana, what about you? Do you feel like you know your rights at work? Do you feel like you know what you can and what you can't do, or legally your rights? Do you feel like you know that?
I think broadly speaking, yes, I know my general overall rights I know what I'm expected to do and what I'm not expected to do, and things that will get me in trouble, etc. But knowing information that's actually beneficial to me as a person and developing, I haven't really known very much of before.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the same. I feel like I know generally what I can and what I can't do. but I'll be honest with you, I haven't really looked into a lot of my other rights, like around annual leave and things like that. I mean, I know that I have looked into that now, but as in a while ago, I hadn't looked into that, and I didn't really know my rights when it came to annual leave. I didn't know much around, the fact that for ages, I didn't know that, you could carry leave forward. I didn't know a lot of things because I just didn't. I was just there. But obviously over time, I've discovered all of these things, and I looked into some of these things as well. And I think that helps. But just looking around me at work, I see some of my other colleagues and I think they know their rights. Some of them, they really know their rights.
Yeah. I feel like I only knew about things through colleagues because they'll do something or something will happen or they'll say something. I'm like, oh, we can do that, or that's the thing, or they seem to know already, and I don't know how they knew or how they found out about it. But I think it feels like there's some information that people have access to already, in terms of work and rights and stuff like that I didn't really have access to or know about, or even if you do know about it, then you're kind of wondering, can I actually implement this though?
Exactly.
Which is another thing. There's one thing knowing about it, the next thing is actually using it.
Exactly. Definitely agree with you, Aravana, that it's one thing to know So having that surface awareness, and it's another thing to move from that to actually feeling like I should have the confidence and the assurance to actually feel okay to place these demands or to actually act upon these rights that I'm supposedly entitled to in the workplace.
Yeah. And I feel like it's interesting the words that we're using, because there's two things, like there's demanding and there's actually acting upon a right that you have already. And I kind of feel like they're different things. And there's negotiating as well. That's something that I'm not good at. But I think that sometimes there's basic things that I thought or felt that would be a demand, but it's actually not a demand, it's a given. It's like what you're right as a worker or as a professional, but I just didn't know. So then I felt like I was asking for something that I shouldn't, or I shouldn't even ask, because, you know, that's not what they're there for. But now I think different.
That's really interesting. And you know, you said that you didn't ask because you didn't feel like that was what they were there for. Can you talk about that a bit more? Like, what did you think?
You know, in the last season, I talked about doing that work, going to a school to speak about speech therapy and stuff like that. Now, obviously, it was my own decision because I had spare leave and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And other things, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take half a day and do this. It's the easiest way around it. I think that's a lot of the stuff for me as well. I'm just like, what is the simplest way that's not going to, you know, ruffle feathers or whatever? So I find a way around it. And then when I was talking to a colleague about it later, she was like, well, you know, we do this every year and we get this time for it. And I was like, what? Okay, like I didn't even know it existed. Do you know what I mean? So that's a small example. And of course, it's laced with my own decisions and my own thought processes and stuff like that, misinformation, whatever you want to call it. But I think that some people, the first thing they'll do is they'll go to the manager and they'll say, like, I'm doing this, can I have some time off for it? Whereas that's not my thought process at all. Mine's just like, this is probably not going to be allowed because it's not really work and
related.
blah blah blah, but it is work related and actually it's beneficial for them as well. I think it's kind of linked to like value as well, and how you value yourself as a worker and your time and your skills and all that. I think it's all linked to stuff, because you just think, oh, it's okay, I'll just do this favor, I'll just do this whatever, but actually, like, it's more than a favor. You don't realize that it is.
That's really good, because I didn't even know that you could do something like that until we had a conversation about it at the time. Another simple example, when I joined the second trust that I worked for, I noticed that training was part of what is provided. Now, it's not that in my first job they didn't provide training, because they did. They provided internal training most of the time, but they didn't support you with external training. And I wanted to go on training, but it just wasn't something that was offered to me as a newly qualified therapist. That was just their team's policy in that sense. But then moving to a new workplace, I then discovered that, oh, I could just ask and apply. And if the panel see that it's fit for me to go, then I can go. And for me, that was different. And I know every trust is different in terms of the way they deal with things. But for me, I just thought, oh, I didn't even know I could ask. I was just there thinking, I'll just have to do a lot of this stuff in my own time.
I
would go to training in the evenings. I would, you know, do online things just to build my skills up or buy books. But I didn't realize that that was part of what was on offer. And even in that workplace, I was being encouraged to go on training. So like my manager was saying to me, oh, it'd be really good for you to do this training. And I thought, wow, so I can ask for things, which sounds ridiculous, but that's generally, that was something for me that was new.
Yeah,
Mm.
you just don't ask, and you don't really think, you don't realize that you can ask. So even silly little, well, silly, but little things like claiming back expenses
Mm-hmm.
and stuff
yes.
like that.
Yes.
There's some people that will claim back every single thing because they know that this is their entitlement, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many times I've just been like, oh, it's whatever,
Get it.
you know, or it's fine. I just assumed that I didn't, there was lots of things. So sometimes I didn't know that I could claim back for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's another thing. So I never knew, there's so many things. I never knew that if you're, I don't know if this is across the board, but apparently if you're sick during your annual leave, you can claim that time back.
I remember you sent me that message. I was like, what?
I was like, what? Do you know the amount of times I've been sick on annual leave? But I've just been like, oh, well, it's life, carry on. But and I found out about it again because I was talking to a friend, a colleague friend, and she was like, yeah, I was really sick on my annual leave for 2 days, so I'm claiming it back, or however it is that you do it. And I was like, huh? What? This is a thing? So it's all these things, and like they're small things, but they're not at the same time. Because for example, with the annual leave, let's say, and we know it's a pattern that happens with a lot of people, especially if we work in schools and stuff, you tend to get sick at certain points because all the kids are sick and all of that stuff, or like you're working so hard and then you kind of don't allow your body to be sick, and then as soon as you have a break you end up being sick. But if you're always using the annual leave that you're entitled to be unwell, then that means that you're not really getting the proper rest and switch off that you're supposed to have. So if there is, like I said, I don't know if this is across the board, but if there is a sort of provision for those sort of situations, of course not taking the mick, but genuinely you were sick and you can get that time back, then you should get that time back. But nobody told me this. And I don't know how my friend knew this. I don't, but I've heard this now. But to be honest, I don't know if I would use it, even though I know now. I don't know if I would have the sort of courage to be like, I was sick, give me my annual leave back.
Really?
I don't know. I think I'll still be a bit like, well, these things happen, sort of thing.
Wow.
If I'm being 100% honest.
But I think what Aradhana said about still not feeling able to, or not able to, but still maybe not wanting to take advantage of some of those things that we have access to. So, you know, like being sick on annual leave, but still maybe thinking, oh, well, it is what it is. It's gone. I just wanted to kind of, I guess, explore that a bit more and think about why is that the case? That sometimes we feel that although this is available, that, you know, we're not going to make use of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that like having the confidence to ask for it, number one, is one thing. And then I think also sometimes even if you are entitled to something, you know, you may ask for it and they may say no. And then you have to kind of fight for it. And sometimes, to be honest, I can't be bothered to fight. I don't find the topic or the issue important enough for me to sort of fight about in my sort of personal circumstance. But at the same time, I know that that's sort of setting up a certain expectation for other people, perhaps. So I think that for me personally, it's just a thing of, can I be bothered or not? Do I find this important enough or not? So like, I remember a while back, there was a certain training opportunity, and some of my colleagues felt that I should have been sent on this particular training thing, and I wasn't. And they were like, no, you should kind of say something. I was like, I can't be bothered. I'm not right now in the mood to be arguing with somebody about something like this. Something else that I feel very passionate about, I will, but I think sometimes I will choose what I put my energy towards, sort of, which is slightly different to what I was talking about earlier in terms of, even though I know I have the right, I still might just be like, oh well. But I think it might be just, I don't know. I think that if I had a good relationship with a particular manager or system or whatever, then I would feel more comfortable pursuing these things, because it kind of feels like something like annual leave for me. It kind of feels like a small thing. I know it isn't. It kind of feels like a small thing, but something like my pay. If I was supposed to be paid a certain amount and I didn't get paid and stuff like that, and I found out, I would pursue that a lot. But I think maybe other things that feel like they're not as much of a, those other things I might not pursue as much. And then I think also, like, sometimes you just don't want to be a problem. If it's something that I know that's like straight away, you know, bang, 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 it's done, by having to like ask, because I kind of feel like some of these things, it should be like, why isn't it at the forefront? Why haven't, why aren't we necessarily just told about these things? You know, but then, I just can't be bothered, to be honest.
I think it sounds like, from what you were saying as well, it definitely sounds like experience plays an impact as well. So if you've had an experience where, you know, you've tried to go for something and it hasn't worked out, you know, that can affect things as well. And I think as well, just thinking about what you said about not wanting to be a problem. Now, when you said that, I immediately thought, the angry Black woman, because
you just don't want to.
That's the thing that some people say sometimes. You don't want to be that person who's difficult. You don't want to be that person who's fighting for something all of the time. And I think that's probably where, you know, we need to learn how to ask for things, so that it's in a professional way that we're asking for these things. And I guess, similar to what you said, knowing when to keep going, when to really fight for something, and when to think, okay, well, fair enough, this is just a battle, I might not win in this situation, fine. But knowing, but the times when you think, actually, no, this is important, knowing when to really fight for that. And I think that in itself is quite relative. So
definitely.
Depends on the work environment, depends on the job, depends on a lot of things. But I think,
because there's certain things that I don't actually mind being an angry Black woman about. Certain things I don't care, but then other things I'm like, I just can't be bothered at this point to be fighting for this thing. But that is an issue, because I feel like sometimes for me, for certain things, it feels like a fight, whereas for other people it's not a fight. It's just like, here you go, like, this is the route. So for me, I just feel like there's certain things that I will kind of quote unquote fight for, and other things I'm just like, it's not really, today's not the day to kind of put my energies into this. And also, I'm the type of person where I will always find a way around it. I will always find a way around you if you're in my way, and if there's something important, I will find a way around it. So for me, that's part of why some of the training stuff, I was just like, I don't care, if you're not going to give it to me, I'll do it another way, which obviously it's not necessarily the best for other people, but that's just how I have dealt with things and have managed things. And then I try my best to make it easier for other people and say, listen, when it's you, do this, this and that. Because that's part of the thing. There isn't necessarily anyone to tell me in our profession, do X, Y, Z, because nobody's done this profession before. In my life. But
I got that.
If I did have somebody that's done it before, they'll be able to say, "Oh, do this," or like, ask them like this, or you know, ensure that you do this. Like, some of the things excuse me, sometimes there's certain things where I will always ask via email. That's one of the things, that's one of a sort of, I don't know, technique that I use, because it's not always the best for me if I ask somebody in person, because later on they'll be like, I didn't say that. So sometimes I'll just always ask via email, because then like, then we both know what's happened or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I think for me, I've just found ways to manage and circumvent stuff, but I think for the next generation, they don't need to do that. It just needs to be, there needs to be, I think I would encourage them to know, to find out what their rights are and to not be worried about asking for things. Of course, I always have to caveat this. Obviously, don't take the mick, don't go overboard, like, you know, just be honest. And I think that sometimes you do have to just ask and not worry about how you're going to be perceived. Just ask, because you're not doing anything wrong by asking a question.
And I think there's a couple of points I want to pick up on. So I think there's something around, obviously, I think it's good that you found a way of navigating around sometimes hearing that no when you've tried to ask for things. But I do think we have to be careful with that in terms of, you know, being too not accommodating, that's not the right word, but kind of doing things, navigating things ourselves too much, to the extent that it's not helpful to us. So we're saying, okay, we'll just do this, or we'll pay for this ourselves, or we'll do this ourselves. But then, you know, ultimately our rights, so our rights could be that, you know, we're entitled to this amount of funding for whatever. But because we've accommodated so much, it's like, it's not really helping us, but it's helping them, because they're still going to benefit from it, but it's not actually helping us. I think we'll have to be a bit careful around that. And then I think my second point was just going to be around the fact that, yeah, I think it is very important to start being able to kind of speak out about what our kind of what our worth is, almost. So just thinking about, like, when it comes to progression and thinking about opportunities at work, or for example, if we've got you know, if we've got more responsibility at work, or we're being stretched in a certain way, you know, how comfortable do we feel in terms of saying, actually, now I've taken on this, is my pay going to increase to reflect that? I personally, I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm not going to lie. For me, that's quite difficult for me to do that. Can either of you guys relate to that?
I think there are times that I've not necessarily like in terms of like I've taken on a role that I feel like I should get an additional payment for, but more like, I think recently I was speaking to someone at work and just talking about how, well, we're working from home now. So all this travel claims and all of that we used to get, like my mobile phone bill has gone up because I'm making lots more calls at home, but that's not been reflected in my claims, if that makes sense. And it's that sort of thing that I spoke to her, because I have a little bit of that kind of relationship with her, where I can just say, is that something you can bring forward when you go to the meeting? She's one of our reps, but actually going to someone directly myself with that sort of thing, I don't know if I'd have the confidence to, because then I don't know if I want people to perceive me like, oh, she's just conscious of money. She's not, and you should be, because you're offering a service. But it's just, I don't know, it's just the way I think about these things. And I think what I've picked up from what you both said so far is the fact that we all have those areas where we're quite very confidently would go and ask for what we think we should be entitled to, and in some other areas, for whatever reason, we find those more challenging. So I think Arabna was saying that in terms of pay, that's a battle you would follow through. Whereas for me, and from what you're saying, Nanya, it sounds like in some ways you're like, that's not the kind of battle I'll pick. Maybe I might pick another kind of battle. So it's just really interesting that we all have different areas where we battle and we choose not to battle.
For some things, you just need to know who you can talk to, you know, and know that you can access these people. I think that knowing your rights and knowing what's available to you is the most important thing, because otherwise you won't find out these things and you won't be able to implement them in your daily life, whether you're worried about being perceived in a certain way or not. You know, that's like a next step, a next angle for me.
Yeah. And just following on from that, I think it's also good to be willing to do things sometimes. You know, I think it's good to be part of a team player to an extent, and sometimes going out of your way and doing things that might not exactly be what you need to do, but I think that's okay to do that sometimes. I think what we're mainly talking about today is just around you know, when it's more the other way, when we're more kind of doing things you know, that are outside of our rights, you know.
I think sometimes it also makes it easier for you to approach people when you kind of know how receptive they are to your proposal. So it doesn't always have to be people saying yes because you've put in the request, and you wouldn't always get a yes, but at least knowing how they would respond to it can also help you boost your confidence to actually broach that conversation to start off with. I think I was saying to both of you about how recently I developed tendonitis, obviously from working from home, sitting in front of a computer and all of that too much. And I'd done like a little bit of stuff, like just like think about my sitting arrangement. Obviously my husband's helped out a bit as well. But I went to work one day and I had a bandage because it was really, really painful. And it's only because I went to work and some of my physio colleagues saw it and were like, oh, what's happened? And they looked at it. That's the only way that and they were like, oh, you should speak to someone about this and see what can be put in place to support you. Otherwise, I think I would have probably gone, and it's not through the fault of my organization. I know that support is there. But like you said, is one thing to know, is having that confidence to ask, like, oh, in a time like this, should I be making demands? Is it the right time? I'm thinking about funding. There are other people. What if everybody starts to have the same pain? And it's just, it's really, really complex. But those are some of the things that I think about. And if people hadn't encouraged me, I don't think I would have followed through, even though I know that my manager, for example, would have gladly said, yes, let's look into that. Let's see. In fact, when I did tell her, she proposed a better way to go about it, if that makes sense. So I think knowing how you'll be received also helps to actually go and have that conversation. So it's definitely something for the organizations as well to think about.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think I keep remembering what Michelle said when we talked to her, as she was like, I am the value.
Exactly.
Like, knowing
See that
your
on a
value.
t-shirt.
Yeah. Knowing your value and valuing your time and your skills and stuff like that, because I think that will help you to find out your rights, know your rights, and act on your rights. If you know fully what your value is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to follow on from that, and just because you've spoken a lot about knowing your rights, and you've just touched on as well, Rabna, about knowing your worth. And I think that's something that's really key, because I think even back to when I started doing private work, for example, I don't do private work anymore, but I had a brief time where I was doing private work, and just things like knowing how much to charge for my services. For me, that was something that I struggled with at the time. And I know some people don't struggle with this, but personally, this is just something I was unsure about, how much should I charge for this, and just not feeling confident to charge as much as what was already out there, or actually, if someone wants you for something, not feeling the confidence to kind of have that conversation and say, actually, yes, I'll do it, but this is what I'm going to charge, and that's not the private work stuff. This is just like other stuff along the side that
Yes.
crops up. That is something that I find very difficult. And I just want to get your thoughts on that as well.
There's two things that I wanted to say. So the first one is that even if you are doing favors for people, sometimes it gets to a point where you have to think about, okay, I'm doing this favor, but what also, is there something that I should be getting out of this as well? Not necessarily money, but it might be like, okay, you know, that whole thing that they used to say, you scratch my back, I scratch yours type of thing. And it's not where you're holding people hostage and not doing anything for them unless they do you a favor as well. But little things like, I was sort of talking to somebody about, you know, when you help people out for a project or something like that, that's fine. But if you need something as well, like let's say you need, so for example, when we were at uni and you did maybe some extra placements or whatever, you could do an extra placement and that's good, but it's also good to negotiate that they will maybe write you a reference for the placement. They might give you a little certificate to prove what you did, or you know, stuff like that, where it's not money, but it's something that is of value to show something for what you did, because you didn't have to come and help them with this particular thing. And I'm not saying do this all the time, but sometimes it's something to think of. If you're always doing these favors over and over again for people, especially the same people, sometimes it's time to sort of think about that for you as well. And then I think the other thing is, obviously, we all work in the public sector. So a lot of times when you've worked in the public sector, it's a lot harder to get out of that way of thinking of this is a quote unquote free service to people. So then when you're doing something that's more private, it can feel a bit more difficult to charge for a service that you would usually do for free, albeit I know via taxes, etc. But yeah, I think that sort of is part of it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there is something about, you know, really getting to value the skills that you have and value the work that you've put in to get to where you are now. I think it's easy to just forget, especially when you're caught up in NHS system and just working just with different people, just to kind of almost overlook your own skills. And I think it's just something about really appreciating what you bring to the table, really recognizing, okay, I don't know everything, and that's fine. No one knows everything, but knowing that it's something that you can also work at, something that you can continue to develop. But then I think it's just, yeah, having the confidence and then being able to actually speak up and say, actually, this is what is on offer. And I think that this ties in as well to when it comes to interviews, and, you know, you're interviewing for a job and, you know, it comes to that point where you might want to negotiate your pay based on the skills that you have. And I know for a lot of people that can be quite challenging at times, because it's like, well, like I would like more, but I don't know how to ask for more, or I don't know if I feel worthy enough to ask for more. So I think a lot of that is tied into confidence as well. And I think if we did feel confident, you know, would we be valued a bit more in terms of our skills? I don't know.
I think the other side that we haven't talked about as much is the sort of top down, and people in positions of power sort of supporting you as well, because obviously other people are doing these things and sort of getting ahead. So they're saying what they want, they're negotiating, they're doing all of these things. So making sure that when somebody else does the same thing or asks for the same opportunity, that the people in positions of power being fair and making sure that they if they are able to kind of give that same opportunity, if they're not clearly saying why they can't, and making sure that it's for good reasons, not just you're not my friend at work type of thing. Because there's the part with you where you have to have the confidence and you have to learn to ask for things and value yourself and all of those things. But you can have all of those things and still not be able to get whatever it is that you need, despite knowing your rights, because or knowing what you should be entitled to, because people who are in higher positions are maybe in the way. So yeah, I think it's both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to kind of find out as well, you know, is this something that is common amongst our culture? Like as people from a BAME background, for example, I guess we can only really speak from the Black perspective because we are Black, but just thinking, is this something that is quite common? Because I mean, I think for me, going into the career, I didn't feel like I really heard from friends, from family, you know, yeah, ask for this or ask for that, you know. I think, to be fair, I did a little bit from my parents, but not a lot, I'd say. I think a lot of it was, yeah, you know, just work hard, just do this, just do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know if that kind of stems from a bit of maybe, you know, like a lot of people who are Black, you know, a few years ago, or like, you know, a few in other generations, whether they felt a bit like, you know, because I'm a minority in this place, I just need to work hard in order to maintain this job. I've got bills, I've got a family to feed. I just need to work hard and keep this. Whether it's come from that kind of mindset where we don't ask for things, we just need to kind of do enough to keep this job. And of course, yes, progression is there and we progress, but it's just, it's like kind of like what we said in the article. It's almost like you're holding on to the job by a piece of thread, knowing that you can lose it at any time. So you don't want to push the boundaries too much out of fear of losing it. And I wonder if that subconsciously might have been passed down from generations. I mean, my parents are a lot more like encouraging now, don't get me wrong, but I'm just wondering if sometimes that mindset might have been what's come through.
I think there's definitely some truth in that, like just thinking about my experience as well. And it's not that like in my family that we're never encouraged to ask, but I think, I don't know, again, going back, there might be a bit of cultural impact in from that as well, in terms of just getting on with things. We just get really good at, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. That actually you're not seeing the impact it's having on you, but also like looking back, then is also going to have an impact on other people. So I think there's definitely truth in what you're saying, that based on things I've seen anyway, that people around me, sometimes it's really difficult. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a general black people thing. Some people are definitely good at asking for their rights. They know, and like I said, it might be through experience, through things that obviously like their upbringing and stuff like that. But I think generally, like you said, it's that kind of, and I think also, I think we kind of touched about this just in our general chit chat, in terms of like just feeling like I'm grateful to have been given this opportunity. I don't want to be a problem. I don't want eyes on me. I don't want any attention, that sort of thing. So just like, well, I've been provided with the minimum that I need to do my job. I'm not going to have a problem. No, like, I'm not going to be a bother if you don't bother me, that sort of thing. I think. Rabna, did you want to add anything to that?
I do think that it's also got to do with the environment. So friends that I know that worked more in finance or those sort of industries are a bit more forthcoming about that sort of thing. They're a bit more able to ask for what they need and negotiate things like that. It's kind of a given. and it's expectation. I find that they I don't know if it's because of the type of jobs that they do, but they will negotiate things, and they do kind of think that it's something that you should be able to do. But I think with our sort of profession, especially when you're such a minority, it's not as you know, it's not as clear cut, because I think that if there isn't that environment and you already come in with maybe your own thoughts of, I'm grateful to be here, I just need to keep my head down and work, you're not going to rock the boat by asking for extra things. You're just going to try and get through, like you've been saying. You're just going to try and just make it through, but then actually longer term it can be detrimental to you if you don't. And also it's unfair if everybody's getting something and you're not getting that. It's not fair, and you should be able to ask why that is happening, and you know, speak up about it, and get those opportunities for yourself as well. But yeah, I think it's quite a complex thing, and I think not having anybody in that environment before as well makes it difficult, because like I said, I've now worked as a speech therapist, I've worked in the NHS and stuff. I can advise somebody else coming up, you know, but there wasn't any, like, even though my mum did work for the NHS as well, but she worked in a completely different field. So it wasn't the same. There's similarities but not the same. So I feel like that's where, you know, I think different workplaces have different sort of support services. I've never really accessed them, but they do have these sort of union type groups. So not necessarily a union, but it may be like a well-being group, or a you know, a group that helps you to understand pay or something like that. So I think that now I would encourage people to get to know that sort of stuff a bit more, like take those things, like, you know, the policies, the work policies, when you start a new job and they're like, read our policies or whatever, take it a little bit more seriously, because you do need to understand these things for yourself so that you can, you know, exercise your rights when you need to. But at the same time, I think that people need to be given an opportunity to know what their rights are. I think certainly when people start their jobs, that it should be highlighted that these are your kind of rights, and look through it. If you don't understand, like, here's people to talk to you about it, just so they know. Because things like, you know, like little things like annual leave and things like that, it is actually quite important to know that you have this facility if you need it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think that leads us on very nicely to our final point, which is about kind of the practical steps that we can take to know our rights more at work, or to even know our worth more and act on that more. And I think I really liked what you said, Arabna, around kind of making use of the services that are available already, but also seeking them out, because I think often we don't even know they are there. So really seeking it out. And something that I've learned along the way really is the staff intranet. There's so much there. And like you said, Arabna, the policies, like I read policies on annual leave, I've read policies on so many things, and found it so helpful because it's clear, it's all there. And a lot of these organizations, they have a legal right to provide us with these things. So it's there. It's just about seeking it out. And actually thinking back as well, I remember being on induction and being given like a staff induction pack, and it talking about a lot of these things in the induction pack. And I looked at it, I thought, this is great. Yeah, that was it. Or my contract, yeah, that looks great. And that's it, but not really spending the time to go back over it, to look through it again, to really familiarize myself with what is there and what is available. But I'd say I'm definitely using the internet a lot more and can see the benefit of it. So that's something I would definitely advise as well, along with like seeking out union support as well, because unions can be really helpful.
Yes.
In terms of kind of signposting you to different organisations. I've used the union in the past, and I found it really helpful in terms of helping me to navigate through certain issues. So I think finding a good union is also really beneficial. And then I think just in terms of the final point for me around kind of knowing your worth, I think it's just about kind of taking your time. I've touched on this earlier, but just really taking your time to appreciate the skills that you have. So recognizing the skills that you have, recognizing, you know, the work that you're doing, you know, is the stuff that you're doing always above and beyond, always, do you know what I mean? Always more than what your current role is. You know, like we said, it's okay to do that sometimes, but if that's a standard for you, it's about thinking about how can I maybe raise this, you know, and I will speak about this another time, but are there any boundaries we need to put in place? Or is there a way that I can verbalize this to my manager and see if there's anything else that can be offered to recognize the skills that I'm bringing to the table. So yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, just follow on from that in terms of like knowing your worth, that actually, I think, like I said before, that we're usually so grateful to be given that opportunity that we don't realize that there is something in us that made that opportunity possible. It's not a case of, and I think that, yes, we all talk about tokenism and stuff, but you're valuable. You're definitely valuable. It's not, don't let anybody make you feel that you only got that seat because of promoting diversity within the organization. That seat is at that table, and sit on it with confidence. That's something that I'm learning a lot more. And I think, like I said before, in terms of also organizations and managers making you, like, at least being receptive to, if nothing else, at least hear you out, not dismissing your request before you even had a chance to fully explain what you mean or what you need, but actually making you feel valued as a member of the team, listening to you. So even if for whatever reason, funding and otherwise, we know that probably those opportunities or that thing that you're asking for may not be possible at that moment in time, but at least hearing you out, and that's to be honest enough that when the time does come, that you are called upon, and giving that opportunity, if that makes sense. So if for whatever reason it's like, oh, at the moment we can't afford to send you off on this training, for example, that actually when there is funding available, please remember me, rather than giving it to someone else, if that makes sense. I think that definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to add. I feel like you guys have sort of covered everything. I would only sort of underline that whole importance of actually finding out as much as possible, and allocating time to actually, and it doesn't have to be when you just get the job, but actually finding out what your rights and entitlements are, and not being afraid to, you know, enact on them when you need to.
On today's episode, we've been talking about knowing your rights, what's available to you at work, as well as knowing your worth, really, in terms of what you bring to the table, having the confidence to actually make requests in the workplace, or to have the confidence to tell someone what you need to help you to continue in your role. And as always, we've left some tips of what both you can do as a person, as what organizations can do to support people within their role. So we hope you enjoy the conversation. Please engage with us on our social media platforms. Let us know your thoughts. Until next time.